President Obama introduced a number of ideas for gun control, banning assault weapons, high-capacity magazines, etc. But those are not in effect. Those have to go through Congress. It is legislation, right? On top of that, he signed 23 executive orders. Now, if a president is abusing his executive power, we are the first show to point it out here. We did it under Bush, and we're doing it under Obama. We take a lot of heat from Democrats now. We used to take a lot of heat from Republicans. This idea of indefinitely detaining U.S. citizens is absurd. We're executing U.S. citizens abroad without a trial. Those are grotesque violations of the Constitution and abuse of executive power. So are these executive orders on gun control along similar lines? Not even close. So all of the Republicans now flipping at, oh my God, there's an executive order. Executive orders have happened all the time. And what it is the executive branch saying, I direct, for example, the president saying, I direct another part of the executive branch, like, for example, the Center for Disease Control, to do something. That's totally within his power. If he can't do that, then he has no power at all. So within these 23 executive orders, did he do something outrageous? No, let me give you an example. He's requiring federal agencies to hand over relevant data for background check system. They already have the data. He's saying, make sure that you coordinate. 1,000,000% within the purview of the executive branch. They're not doing anything new. All they're saying is, hey, look, if this department and that department have data on background checks, they should share it to make sure that, for example, we don't have a mentally ill person who gets through that web and winds up getting a gun, as happened at Virginia Tech. Totally reasonable. First responders and school officials should have better training for active shooting situations. Who's against that? You want the cops to have worse training? I mean, obviously within the executive branch, and obviously unobjectionable, unless you're crazy. And then I don't think even conservatives can find a way to object to that. Then he's directing the Centers for Disease Control to research causes and prevention of gun violence. Wow. Research? Oh my, I can't believe Obama destroyed the Second Amendment. He wants research. Centers for Disease Control, within the control of the executive branch. He's saying, with the funds you already have, do this research. Totally within executive power. If it was outside of executive power, even if I agreed with the policy, I promise you that I would come down like a ton of bricks and say it is not the right way to go. This is exactly what the president is supposed to do. Now, you can disagree with the policy. That's perfectly understandable. But you can't say that it's a violation of the Constitution or his role. That's nuts. But of course, the present-day Republican Party is nothing but nuts. It's just, what kind of nut are you? A walnut, a chestnut, chin nut? So let's go to one of those, Sean Hannity. He's going to talk to Rand Paul in a second, but first he's got to get this out of his system.
My next guest has decided to stand up to King Obama. And in a Hannity exclusive, Senator Rand Paul is unveiling new legislation to stop Obama's assault on your Second Amendment rights.
King Obama. Here we go. I can't. Oh, research. He wants the cops to get better training. What a king. What a monarch. So he continues.
But it's not the first time that he's done this. And there have been I mentioned this earlier in the program. He didn't seek congressional authority when he used military strikes on Libya, recess appointments. The Senate wasn't in recess. He couldn't get the DREAM Act passed, so an executive order to allow illegal immigrants to stay in the country. Obamacare, obviously he used the reconciliation process. They wouldn't defend the Defense of Marriage Act. They weakened welfare work requirements and the contraceptive mandate. He's doing all of this now without congressional approval.
Okay, 40% of that is a total fabrication. They didn't loosen the work requirements in welfare. It's just a total lie. 40% of it is true, things that they actually did do, but are totally within executive power. And he's actually right about, for example, Libya. Now, I agreed with the Libya policy, but did the president overstep his bounds by not going to Congress? Yes, every president's doing it, and it's wrong. Look, if you're going to go to a military action, it's a war. If it looks like a war, it acts like a war, it's a war. You got to do a declaration of war and you got to go through Congress. So he's right about that. The rest of it is like, oh my God, I can't believe he did the same exact things as Bush, but actually a little less. So spare me the indignation about the monarch. The czars. All the Republicans are now talking back, bring the czars back. They were all the same czars under Bush and Reagan. Unreal. So now finally here comes Rand Paul.
You have separation of powers, so the powers check and balance each other. And I'm very concerned about this president. FDR had a little bit of this king complex also. We had to limit FDR finally because he served so many terms that I think he would have ruled in perpetuity. I'm very concerned about this president garnering so much power and arrogance that he thinks he can do whatever he wants.
FDR would have served in perpetuity, but the Republicans limited him. I got bad news for you. He died in office, and you didn't limit him at all. Okay, and he's a beloved president that was incredibly successful. Now, look, later, limited to 2 terms, the presidents are. I actually agree with that. But you got to check your history a little bit. But his idea is, oh my God, these progressives who want to be king. I know, because the left wing abuses their power. The right wing would never do that, right? And other times, Paul has said our founding fathers were very concerned about us having the separation of powers, which is true. If it was a real issue, they didn't want to let the president become a king. I mean, they're calling this guy a king over and over again. It's madness based on this. You weren't worried about the warrantless wiretapping. You weren't, I mean, and to be fair to Rand Paul, he was worried about the National Defense Authorization Act, but the rest of the Republican Party wasn't. You're worried about him saying, hey, do a little bit more research at CDC. Okay, Rand Paul also said, I'm afraid that President Obama may have this king complex sort of developing. I think there's a history of this arrogance. And also said, I'm against having a king. I got it, dude. I got it. I got you. King, king, king. I got it. God, these guys are amazing at propaganda. I think having a monarch is what we fought the American Revolution over, and someone who wants to bypass the Constitution, bypass Congress, that's someone who wants to act like a king or a monarch. Look, President Obama, in his first term, acted, by all indications, incredibly weak. Now, when you go to negotiations, I'm not the one saying it. John Boehner would come out of the negotiations, as he did one time, and talked to 60 Minutes and said, I got 98% of what I wanted. He did it again in this fiscal cliff deal that the Republicans kept crying about. Boehner said, after the deal, he said, look, man, we got the Bush tax cuts made permanent, which we couldn't do under Bush, for 99% of Americans. He's like, I think I won that one. Yes, they keep pushing Obama around and winning. And the minute he does the simplest little things, they're like, oh, king, monarch, I can't believe, shut up, do as we tell you. You're not the president, we're the president. Can you believe how arrogant this guy is? Unreal, man. Look, these guys they're off the deep edge. So if I was the president, I'd be like, okay, wait. You want to complain about my executive orders? That's funny you mentioned that, because I got 23 more today. We can keep talking. You want to keep going? Go back on Hannity. Let me see if I can come up with another 23 tomorrow. Now, look, don't abuse the office, and I would never be in favor of that. But this is nowhere near it. Just because the Republicans are screaming it doesn't make it true, doesn't make it a real debate. It doesn't mean that you should split the difference and go, oh, I guess maybe he's not a king, maybe he's a prince. No, these are perfectly acceptable. Look at the actual facts to determine what the reality is. Don't listen to this nonsense propaganda.